always knew in my life I wanted to go into healthcare. The cliche, I want to help people, I want to make a difference, and care about people. So I was also the pre-PA track, not really knowing what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go clinical or more on the administrative side. I shadowed a OBGYN because I always thought I wanted to deliver babies. Did not like it. For me, it was very mundane, the same kind of thing every single day. You go into the clinic, you meet your patients, you do an annual, you do a checkup. It was kind of boring for me. So going into my senior year, I got a internship through Northwell, which is called the Healthcare Management Program. So it's short for HMP, which is very similar to HCMP. So through that, I worked at one of the tertiary hospitals on Long Island, and got exposed to hospital operations. So hospital operations, it seems like a very broad word, and you're like, what does that entail? I got to experience absolutely everything from HR, patient experience, working with nurses, physicians, working on facilities projects, working in the operating rooms, really a vast majority of everything that goes into a hospital and healthcare itself. From there, I was able to get a full-time offer to come back in what we call the MAP program. So a lot of acronyms. That is called the Management Associate Program. So that is a 2-year training program where you're stationed at one of the hospitals or service lines at Northwell Health for 2 years. You, again, get exposed to absolutely everything and anything that you want to get exposed to, and really start learning those project management skills, start understanding what you're mostly interested in, learn a lot of Excel, data analytics, all of that good stuff. And then from there, I got pulled into the eastern region of Northwell Health. So if we have like Long Island right here, it's broken into 3 regions, which is Northwell. So we have the western, the central, and the eastern, so the east end of Long Island. So that spans 7 hospitals that I got to work directly with their executive directors on high-level strategic initiatives. And then, of course, COVID happened. So worked on a lot of initiatives with that. So I actually ran the monoclonal steering committee for all of Northwell. So what we've been giving to patients to treat them if they're high-risk COVID patients. I got to work in the command center, boots on the ground, handing out food, meeting with frontline nurses just to make sure they were doing okay during all of this time. And I also ran the Eastern Region load balancing. So if one hospital was getting too many COVID patients, we would send them in an EMS to another hospital that could better treat them because they had more space in their ICUs or on their medical floors altogether. So very heavily focused COVID recently. Also related to COVID, I was able to work on setting up testing for a lot of our sites, one of which at Huntington, we're the first one to do the drive-through testing kind of model of you stay in your car the whole time, you drive up, you get swabbed, and you get your results within 24 hours. I also was able to work on with the vaccine mandate. Unfortunately, we had to lay off quite a few number of people, but not too many. But I was able to lead those efforts as well in regards to checking daily as to who was getting vaccinated, who wasn't. Didn't have to have any of those critical conversations, thank God, but did help in those efforts behind the scenes. So now back to a day-to-day basis. One of the things I loved about going into healthcare was it's different on a day-to-day basis. So you could come in one day thinking, oh, I have my meetings from 9 to 5, fine. This morning, we actually had the DOH come in. So we had the Department of Health coming into our dialysis unit to do a review. So that means some meetings fall off and your efforts now change to make sure that we have everything we need to be appropriately prepared for the accreditation, which is why I love healthcare. One of the things I always struggled with when I was in college and senior year, a lot of people were going down the consulting route. And that to me was just not very interesting. I didn't want to work with a client for a couple of weeks and then leave them and go work on a completely different client and a different project. So one of my first bosses actually considered us in the MAP program, which is what I started after college, where we're internal consultants. We get to become the expert of Northwell, of the facility you're at, builds relationships within the large system that we are, which is 23 hospitals, I believe. So very large system that spans the Northeast. So you get to be that internal consultant, but you actually get to be the expert of it. So you get to experience the excitement of everything that goes on in healthcare rather than just working on one-off projects for certain clients. So that's why I found the allure of working at a large healthcare system is you get to be a little bit more hands-on in the chaos of things, which could be great for some people and a little overwhelming for others, but those are my favorite kind of days. Some of the high-level projects I'm working on right now is I do oversee a few clinical areas. So our neurosciences, we're currently building a neurosciences unit. We're playing around with certain technologies such as new microscopes and also virtual reality, which is an interesting kind of take on physical therapy and mental health, all for stroke patients and the neurosurgery patients. I also work, as I said, on the Cancer Institute. So building a cancer institute on Long Island. Usually you think of Memorial Sloan Kettering, go to the city, receive your cancer care, but we're trying to compete with them and really have top-notch surgeons that we're trying to build a space around and also a program around. So that also goes into not only the hospital, but the ambulatory network that feeds our hospital. So really touching upon absolutely anything that you can think about. I also work very closely with the operations team. So think of the hospital as a very large home that has lots of problems and it's very old. So anything from leaking pipes that you have to work on to bricks falling off a building, just to regular maintenance or wanting to redo certain things. So we recently opened in our lobby a caregiver center where patients, loved ones could come in and speak to a social worker and receive the support that they need. But building that caregiver center, there's a whole project around it. You want to make it pretty. You want to make sure it has the appropriate space and atmosphere for all of the families to come into. So all that goes into these little projects, you get very nitty gritty. So it's important to have project managers like myself that you have the tracker to make sure everyone's on track. You can provide the data that they need to make these crucial decisions and then also help make those decisions. You're not just feeding people information and kind of never hearing about it again, but you're involved from day one to the end when you're finally done with the project.
That's great. Thank you so much for that explanation. I mean, you have worked on a variety of projects. It definitely sounds like a lot of operational projects. And I think that experience in the beginning where you were able to get exposure to all the different hospitals, I know a lot of students really value that to kind of understand where they might fit. I don't know if there's anything more you would want to say about that program, because I do think students would be interested in hearing more about it.
Yeah. So I highly, highly recommend the Management Associate program at Northwell. It, again, is a 2-year training program, but you see all new leaders of Northwell come from this program. And whenever someone says, I'm interested in healthcare administration, they tell you go through the MAP program. It is a different version of consulting where you could actually get your foot in the door of a large healthcare system and have a lifelong career here. So people who are vice presidents very high up in the organization come through this program. You're giving all of the training tools that you possibly need. You build relationships with other people, other peers that are your age as well. So if you don't know what's going on, you can confide in them of like, do you know how to do this? I don't know how to do this. And you work through those problems together and build your own network through that way, which is really great to kind of struggle with someone else that is struggling with you. Through that, you get exposed to every single facet of healthcare. So some people find a great passion for human resources that they never thought they would have been interested in before. So they could go down a human resources route. Other people find a true love for cardiology. They could go into our cardiology service line. They could do anything in regards to a site cardiology program where they could be the director of cardiology there. So there's truly so many different ways that you could get exposure to what you want. And it gives you 2 years to kind of figure out what you want. I love being a generalist where I could get exposed to all of the projects and know a little bit about everything. Other people want to become that expert in specific areas. Some people even go to work in engineering and be the director of engineering because that's what they were passionate about. So it really is just 2 years that you get very intense training, but on real life projects. You are a true full-time employee at Northwell, but you are given a grace period of it's okay if you make a few mistakes here and there because we're all learning it together. They'll teach you how to make PowerPoints that are beautiful. They'll teach you how to do Excel spreadsheets, make a dashboard, how to just actually speak to people and presentation skills. You'll get all of that within 2 confined years and have an opportunity to stay within Northwell if you choose after that.
Great, thank you. Well, so you're getting a master's now. Would you mind sharing what led to that decision to pursue a master's degree and how you think that's going to help your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided to get a master's because after the 2 years of the MAP program, I still wanted to continue learning. So with that, I went to Boston College for my master's in healthcare administration. There, it's kind of an extension of the HCMP program, but you actually have so much experience that it's a lot more relevant of what you're learning. So your papers are based off of the projects that you're actually working on in the hospital and your relevant knowledge that you're actually doing day to day. So you get to apply the knowledge you're learning in your master's to the projects you're working on. So it correlates directly to it, and it makes it a lot easier to understand the information and a lot more relevant as, that's why. And even some of the papers I was reading were like Dr. Stoto's papers. So it comes full circle, but it is an extension of the HCMP program, but just a lot more relevant. And it's always good because healthcare is an ever-changing industry. So things I learned about when I was an undergrad drastically changed in just 4 years. And now I'm relearning them in a different light because policy is constantly changing. Management and leadership approaches are constantly changing. I also had the experience of like learning about policy while COVID was happening. So thinking international policy, not just what we currently have in the United States. So putting all of those pieces of the puzzle together were really great. And it helps you get to the next step of your career. Especially at Northwell, it's kind of expected that you get your master's to move up to the next level, which is sometimes frustrating. But after going through the program for 2 years, you realize why you have to do it, because they don't want you just to be an expert in Northwell. They want you to understand what's going around in the entire healthcare industry so you could better plan your projects, plan your strategy for should I grow ambulatory services? Should I grow inpatient services? And just understanding how the national climate is going to impact what you do at the hospitals.
Fabulous. Okay, this is my last question for you all. Please, write your questions in the chat or be ready to raise your virtual hand. What would you have done differently while at Georgetown, knowing what you now know?
I actually just had a conversation with another alumni of Georgetown who was also an HCMP major, 3 years younger than me. And he right now is looking to find a job. And I was like, I don't think I took advantage of the fact that our professors are true professionals in the healthcare industry, where you just view them as like, oh, I'm going to class. I enjoyed the class with them. No, they are renowned professors that we have the privilege to be learning from and working with, where I wish I still kept in touch with them. I wish I still had those relationships with them outside of class, where in class, they were helpful during office hours. I needed them all the time, utilized them all the time to get those good grades. But realistically, I should have been learning more from their experiences, learning more what they're doing outside of Georgetown, outside of just teaching you as a professor, but the connections that they have to healthcare systems, the connections they have on doing research, the connections they have to other industries as well. So really just taking advantage of the fact that we go to a school with amazing professors and they're there to really help you make those connections. And I know one of my fellow classmates got a job through knowing a professor very closely. So just keeping those connections and actually building better relationships with them as opposed to just trying to get a good grade in the class, but learning from them.
Perfect. One last question. With the MAP program that you mentioned, when does Northwell recruit for that? Do you remember?
So if you do the internship program, which I highly recommend, it's really important, also side note, just to have an internship going into your senior year. Whether you love it or hate it, it's going to help you understand where you want to see yourself in the professional career. So some people who did the H&P program hated it, left. Other people were like, this is my calling in life. So just take internship opportunities because they will direct you towards your passions. So the healthcare management internship, those applications are usually due in December. And then you usually get an offer in January. So you'll go through the whole internship interview process. And then for the MAP program, they typically are open, they open a little bit more sporadic. So with the internship, we try to fill as many MAP positions as we can through the internship, but then more people want MAPs because they realize how important they are to the organization. So right now, I believe there are 4 MAP positions currently open. It is easy to apply online through Northwell Health, just looking for available positions, or if you know anyone. So if you guys want to forward along an email note, your resume, I could easily forward that along as well, because I'm heavily still connected to the MAP program and have a MAP of my own now. So usually those positions do open up after the summer, so probably like October-ish, and they naturally just start opening more and more.
Okay, great. So let me know if you have questions. In the meantime, I've spoken to some alums at hospitals that also do project management that's more technology based. Are any of your projects technology based, or could you share a little bit more about what that looks like and how it might be different?
Yeah, absolutely. So with technology, are you referring a little bit to like EMRs and innovation, or yeah, okay. So a lot of that is kind of, I'm not an IT expert, but I will be asked to assist with certain projects like that. So one of the more simpler IT projects I worked on was just pagers that we have in the hospital, nothing fancy. But looking through the pagers that we have in the hospital, who's utilizing them and how could we cut back on costs? So that's like a simple IT project. Then there's also higher up ones where you're introducing telemetry monitoring across your hospital. So that's one we're currently working on. Right now, telemetry is more for like higher advanced cases, think cardiac neuro cases, as opposed to just your typical inpatient medicine bed. So that we only had 2 tele floors, so telemetry floors in our hospital. And now we're rolling out telemetry house-wide that is capable via Wi-Fi. So this way, whatever bed you're in, we have the capability to make it tele, which means you don't have to be moved. If you need a higher level of care, you could stay in your current bed and receive the appropriate level of care that you need, instead of at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, a transporter coming down and moving you up to the higher acuity floor. So it allows for a more fluid care model for everyone. And it also means we could train all of our nurses up to the highest level of tele. This way, no matter where you are, you get the appropriate level of care. So that's been the most recent one. It's a long rollout. So we will be officially going live in May, but we've already done 3 of our units, and then we just have to do the rest of them by May. And that includes like working with your own IT vendors, the system IT team, and then also Philips Monitoring, who is the company that gives you the monitoring. And then also with that, you have to do all nursing education to make sure they have the appropriate education to actually care for these types of patients. They know how to read the monitors appropriately, all of that. So when you think of one area project like IT, it affects the entire house, from nursing to project managers to finance, because we could bill now for more tele beds. So truly, you think less in silos, but more of how it affects everyone.
Perfect. Thank you. So we do have a question. What research tools do you find most helpful in the work you do? And I would just say like tools in general. So you can start with research tools, but what tools do you find most helpful?
Yeah. So question for you, Mandy, when you say tools, what exactly are you referring to? Nope. Okay. So particularly in healthcare and searching suppliers. No. Yep. Okay. So a lot of my master's was learning best practices, which again was the beauty of getting a master's while you're working on the spot. But you will see IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Information, I think it is. They have available resources and available classes that you could take. So you will learn a lot about quality management, doing specific cycles such as a PDSA cycle, a SWOT analyses, and all of these different techniques that you could use to best approach a process improvement. So process mapping, you'll also learn. There are a lot of different things, and you tailor your approach to each project. One of them is also an FMEA process, which is a failure mode and effects analysis. Again, these are all very fancy terms, but you will learn them on the job or learn them through your master's, and they're fairly straightforward once you learn the reasoning behind each of them. So that is kind of what you do in terms of how to approach process improvement. In regards to also best practices, you will be surprised how many people still get those little journals emailed to them with all research papers. This way you could stay up to date on what's going on in the industry. Whenever you start a specific process improvement initiative, so one I'm working on right now is medication reconciliation, making sure when a patient comes into the hospital, we know what medications they're on. So this way, when they're in the hospital, we can still provide them to them. Because if you forget their blood pressure medication or their seizure medications, they could fail on us at the hospital, and that's our fault. So one of the things we first started is by doing a typical literature search, going on Google, going on PubMed and saying, hey, what is the best practice for medication reconciliation? And then you'll read a couple of articles to get the gist of what other people find valuable and kind of take those practices and apply them to your own facility. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was extremely helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Can I ask something?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, so I'm doing my master's at Georgetown, the health admin system one. And I actually think there's a few girls that are in your program or like doing the residency thing right now, which is super cool, the 2-year program. But how did you know between like consulting and going into what you're doing more with like the organizational and strategic management? Because I'm struggling between a lot of my professors encourage consulting and they think it's a great career path, but I see more policy and working in a hospital setting. So what made you know your passion, I guess?
Yep. So I like being the boots on the ground. I like meeting the frontline team members that are actually working on the projects that your project will impact directly. I liked having a true team around me where, yes, in consulting, you have a team, but it's just of other consultants. I have a team of the executive director to say, I have a team of clinicians, I have a team of physicians, I also have a team of other project managers. It's more of like a network feel of you have a larger support system rather than just your consulting team of what project you're working on. And it also allows you to tap into those people if you're stuck on a project of, hey, you've done this at another hospital. What do you think is the best way to do it at our hospital that's slightly different? What worked for you? What didn't? You have the ability to speak to them about the problems that they're also experiencing and kind of go through it on your own, which I liked. In terms of the traditional consulting route, I know a lot of people that ended up doing that as well outside of the program, and they honestly really like it and they do build lifelong careers there. I just knew I wanted to feel embedded in a home rather than just project to project.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question, Carrie. A question with going back to this MAP program, what would make somebody more attractive for that program? So let's say they didn't get, they didn't do the internship. How do they set themselves up to be attractive? My next question is, what are other entry-level positions at Northwell that would have this intersection of business and health that you'd also recommend pursuing?
Yeah. So the funny thing about Northwell is you can meet a CEO that has a background as a clinician. You can meet a CEO that started as a data analyst. You can meet someone that started as an accountant. There is truly no right or wrong path to the top at Northwell, which is what I love. Even Michael Dowling, he, I believe, started as a transporter. So you truly just have to get your foot in the door and the world is yours. That's one of the great things is I would say if you don't get in the MAT program, the best titles to look for are analyst, data analyst, informationalist. Those are kind of the next best things to the program. And you just simply have to have the conversation with your manager of, hey, I'm interested in getting exposed in X, Y, and Z, and I'd like to become a project manager from this. And every single manager at Northwell wants to grow you. They'll get you exposed to absolutely anything you want to be exposed to, include you on projects that have nothing to do with your actual job description because they want to see you grow and move on to the next thing. With that, in order to be a better kind of MAT candidate, I would say a lot of it is in your interview skills as well. You have to have the professional presence. You have to prepare for the interview. It's one thing to get your resume in the door, but another to actually nail the interview, which is what I've seen a lot of people struggle with outside of college because you haven't had the skill sets or even practice with interviews of the behavioral questions they'll ask you, the situational awareness questions they'll ask you. So being able to answer those eloquently and kind of prepare an answer with specific examples as well. For the actual resume building, we do a great job, at least in the HCMP program, of you have to have an internship your senior year. Highly recommend. You need all of the experience you could get while you're still in college. And I know that can be difficult because you want to have fun on the weekends. You want to relax a little bit. It's your last time to be young. But at the same time, it's your time to learn what you like and what you don't like. It might not lead to a job, but you get to learn a few skill sets here and there that will help guide you to the right position and the right job eventually. Also, cannot say enough, like, find out what you don't like. I thought I was going to be a PA. I shadowed one and I hated it. So you have to shadow. If you think you're going to go clinical, shadow. If you think you want to go administrative, even if it's not a paid internship, ask someone to shadow them for 2 weeks. That's it. This way you could still put that on your resume that you shadowed them, but you could also narrow down to what you are interested in. And don't stay closed-minded either. There are so many different fields of healthcare that you don't even know about. I'm still discovering them every single day. I'm like, oh, we have a change management. Like, didn't know that was a thing. Clinical transformation, just found out. So there's so many different avenues that you could go down. There's not one traditional route. And I just say, take any advantage that you get and just learn from it, whether you love it or hate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gabrielle. It looks like we're out of questions. And so I just want to give a